Hello, welcome to David's Den. I'm David and I make videos about Stephen King here on YouTube and all of the television and film adaptations of his work. Right now I'm doing a readathon in publication order, so today I'm going to give you 18 fun facts about the 1997 miniseries adaptation of The Shining, plus a few little bonus facts as we go. I gave you my review on the film as if it had nothing to do with the book. Click here for that. The Shining aired on ABC for 3 nights from April 27th through May 1st in 1997. Now, ABC was willing to take a chance on The Shining because they had already had success with other miniseries adaptations of Stephen King's work, such as It, starring Tim Curry and Richard Thomas, The Tommyknockers, starring Jimmy Smits and Joanna Cassidy, also a Star Trek and 6 Feet Under connection for my fellow fans. In 1994, The Stand was made for ABC, starring Gary Sinise, Molly Ringwald, and Miguel Ferrer. It was also directed by Mick Garris, who happened to direct Sleepwalkers, another Stephen King movie, although it was straight to screenplay and not based on a book. Mick Garris also went on to direct Riding the Bullet, Desperation, and Bag of Bones after The Shining, all of which are adaptations of Stephen King works. It is well known that Stephen King does not like Stanley Kubrick's 1980 adaptation of his book, although that movie is considered a classic in the horror genre. The reason for this is tied to the theme of the original novel, the characterization of Jack, and the way that Stanley Kubrick changed the ending of the book. Stephen King has never been quite so outspoken about his dislike of another adaptation of his work, and maybe that's because The Shining is very autobiographical in nature. Jack's alcoholism and fears of fatherhood directly reflected Stephen King's emotions at the time of the book's writing. The only twist here is that in order to write his own adaptation, Stephen King had to get permission from Stanley Kubrick, who owned the rights to any sort of adaptation of the book. Kubrick agreed, but only if Stephen King would commit to not speaking bad about his movie in public anymore. Yet, cinematographer Shelley Johnson may have wanted to give homage to John Alcott, the cinematographer for Stanley Kubrick's film. The first shot of the Torrances talking about the Donner Party in the car is virtually identical to the same moment in Kubrick's version. The Shining was shot on location at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel is actually an inspiration for the novel. It said on Stephen King's website that in September of 1974, Stephen King's wife Tabby and him spent a night at the Grand Old Hotel in Estes Park. They were the only guests, as it turned out, and the following day they were going to close the place down for the winter. Stephen King wandered through its corridors and thought that it seemed the perfect setting for a ghost story. Later that night he dreamed of his 3-year-old son running through the corridors looking back over his shoulder. His eyes were wide and he was screaming. He was being chased by a fire hose in King's dream. Then he woke up with a tremendous jerk, he lit a cigarette, and sat in the chair looking out the window at the Rockies. By the time the cigarette was done, he had the bones of the book firmly set in his mind. And by the way, he stayed in room 217. And 217 is actually a corner room in the Stanley Hotel. To make it easier for the cameras to fit in and to get different angles, director Mick Garris decided to put the room number 217 on a door in the middle of the hallway. To increase the claustrophobic fear of being enclosed in the hotel, Mick Garris also made the hotel darker by painting some of the interior brown because he thought the original white felt a little too open and light for what he was going for. Other fun facts about the Stanley Hotel: in 1976, Bob Dylan and Joan Baez stayed in the Stanley while on the Rolling Thunder Review tour, and in 1994 the entire cast and crew of Dumb and Dumber stayed in the hotel while they were filming nearby. A huge plot point in the book is the topiary coming alive. There is actually not a topiary in front of the Stanley Hotel. When Stephen King visited the hotel in 1974, there was actually a long promenade in the open area in front of the Stanley for guests to stroll along and enjoy the view of the Rocky Mountains. Then in 2015, the current owner, John W. Cullen, decided to celebrate his 20-year anniversary as the owner of the Stanley by building a hedge maze, which would mirror the maze in Stanley Kubrick's film. The hotel hosted a competition for the layout, and there was a design by architect Myram Dalarian Standing that won. Don't worry though, the maze is only 3 feet tall so you can't get lost in it, and it's made of juniper bushes. The Stanley Hotel is actually haunted. There has been a lot of paranormal activity reported for the hotel, and the Stanley even appears in the TV shows Ghost Hunters on A&E and on the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures. The staff of the hotel reports seeing the ghost of Freeland Oscar Stanley, the man responsible for building the hotel, roaming the billiards room or sitting at the bar. His wife, Flora Stanley, is also said to play the piano now and then. A housekeeper, Elizabeth Wilson, was injured in an explosion while lighting lanterns in room 217. After she passed away a few years later, guests report that things will move around the room and that they will return from being out to find their suitcases packed, as if Mrs. Wilson wanted them to leave. Mrs. Wilson was also very conservative. Unmarried couples have reported feeling a cold presence get between them while they are in bed together. The staircase in the main lobby of the hotel has also been called a vortex. It's described as a tornado of spiritual energy and a paranormal portal where guests and employees have felt cold spots, sudden dizziness, orbs and distortions have been caught on camera, and Freeland Oscar Stanley and his wife have been seen walking down the staircase holding hands. The Stanley also gives haunted hotel tours with a spot where batteries die and cell phones don't work. The Stanley Hotel isn't actually isolated as the film leads you to believe. It's surrounded by the town of Estes Park, Colorado, less than a mile from downtown proper. Johnson used clever camera angles to hide the rest of the city from the frame, but it didn't always work. When the Torrance family runs out to play in the first snowfall, you can see a yellow truck on the far right of the frame in the widescreen version. Most of the snow seen in The Shining is fake, even though they shot in the winter in the Rocky Mountains. The Stanley Hotel is in what's called a snow shadow. Because of the surrounding terrain, the mountains, they get very little snowfall right over the hotel. Most of it gets blocked. Only one heavy snowstorm provided actual snow for the film. Producer Mark Kyliner says that they lucked out with that particular storm because a Ute shaman did a ritual at the highest peak in the Rocky Mountains. For the rest of the shoot, they used snow machines to lay out fake snow, but sometimes they weren't quite so clever. They forgot to cover the roof, so the snow on the ground doesn't always match the snow on top of the building. Stephen King self-censored his own script for television, cutting a lot of the language out and some of the scenes that went a little too far for the censors. But then ABC's Standards and Practices division thought they needed to cut even more.
You take your job and stick it.
Was originally, you can take your job and stick it up your ass. Rebecca De Mornay was attached to the role in 1994, almost 3 years before filming began. Stephen King himself requested Rebecca De Mornay for the role, and she read the screenplay, accepting immediately, saying it was scarier, more disturbing, and more entertaining than the Kubrick film, as well as a more faithful adaptation of the novel. Stephen King may have also given De Mornay a nod in his 2013 novel Dr. Sleep, which is actually a sequel to The Shining. In it, he writes the sentence, "The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world." And of course, Rebecca De Mornay was the star in the horror feature The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Don't with me, retard.
There was a long and difficult search for an actor to play Jack Torrance in the miniseries of The Shining. Gary Sinise was offered the role after having worked with Mick Garris and Stephen King on The Stand, and Tim Daly of Wings fame was also offered the role, among others. It is reported in some places that Rebecca De Mornay suggested Steven Weber, and in others that it was Tim Daly. Whoever threw his name out, Steven Weber was reportedly chosen for the role only 4 days before filming began. And the nosebleed during the scene where he's talking to his father's voice in the CB radio wasn't planned. Steven Weber's nose spontaneously started to bleed, and he decided to keep filming rather than stopping the scene. But that's not the only goof. Shelley Johnson didn't seem to be paying very close attention to the details in his cinematography. You can catch a reflection of the boom mic in the Overlook's main doors behind Watson at the beginning of the film. You can see the boom mic reflected as well in the hood of the red car beside Jack while he's hitting George Hatfield. You can see some of the crew reflected in Halloran's car when he's talking to Danny in the first episode. While Elliot Gould's Ullman is showing Jack the Denver croquet court, you can see 2 kids on the side of the screen just waiting for their cue to run to their parents. Maybe they should have been acting the whole time. There are also plenty of continuity errors. For example, in the shot when the Torrances are standing on the stairs as they're being left alone in the hotel for the first time, there is no rail on the left side of the porch steps. The next time we see the stairs, The rail is back. There is also a bath mat in room 217 as the woman gets into the tub. It was then removed for the effect of the blood dripping onto the tile so we could hear the sound. Missing items aren't the only continuity errors. The bug bomb that Jack gets when he finds the wasp's nest, he puts under his arm. When he leaves the shed, it's magically under the opposite arm. There is also a mutating mustache. Dick Halloran draws a mustache on Ullman's picture at the beginning of the movie, but later on, the mustache looks different. The makeup effects team used saran wrap and KY jelly to create the effects for the woman in room 217. They used KY jelly as glue to stick thin strips of saran wrap all over her body. Then milky flesh tones of makeup were used to cover the wrap after they had put purple makeup under. They then covered her body in latex and ripped certain areas off to make it look like her skin was falling off of her body. Special effects director Steve Johnson said that the idea was to try to do something that was different, that would look cool, play in the scene, and be allowed on television. And by the way, Cynthia Garris, the actress who plays the woman in room 217, is director Mick Garris's wife. She wasn't the only cameo. Mick Garris put himself into the movie. He's one of the recovering alcoholics at the Sidewinder Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Stephen King, well known for making cameos in a lot of his movies, plays the band conductor as the party starts in the hotel with all the ghosts. Interesting fact though, while the character doesn't have a name within the body of the story, in the credits he is given a name, Gage Creed. This is the same name as the 2-year-old boy in Pet Sematary. It is confirmed to be Gage Creed now, but it is misspelled in the credits as Cage Creed. Frank Darabont, who directed The Shawshank Redemption, makes a cameo in the hotel lobby as a ghost. Darabont came onto the set of The Shining simply to tell Stephen King that he was agreeing to direct the adaptation of The Green Mile, and got talked into being on camera. The voice of Jack's father is played by Miguel Ferrer, who is in 2 other Stephen King adaptations, The Night Flyer and The Stand, although Ferrer's voiceover work was not credited in the film.
Death doesn't mean much in the Overlook, don't you know that?
Finally, Sam Raimi, director of The Evil Dead and the Spider-Man trilogy, has a cameo as the garage attendant who rents the snowmobile to Dick Halloran.
Yeah, well, you're one dead MFA.
He also had a cameo in The Stand a few years earlier. Well, that's about it. Thanks for tuning in to this very first episode of Fun Facts. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave me a comment down below if you want to see more videos like this.